Please go ahead, sir. We are live now, sir.
Hello. Yeah. Good evening, everybody.
Yes.
Yes. I'm starting with your permission. Okay. Yeah. Good evening, my dear friends. Welcome to this Smart Habitat Foundation's 11th lecture series with the SOCAM Council of Green and Eco-Friendly Movement GEM and with the chapters of Indian Institute of Architects, Northern chapter, Punjab chapter, Haryana chapter on this very interesting topic of reinventing new trends of human settlement in mega cities of India, or you can say all over in India, because this coronavirus is something which is global everywhere. And we are very grateful to the very eminent, globally renowned class of speakers on this webinar, which is being conducted today. Thanks to SOCAM James President, Mr. Pankaj Dhaker, who has been kind enough to get himself associated with Smart Habitat Foundation and to create a larger platform where we can understand each other and from various these type of industrial platforms as well, we can able to really expand our horizon of understanding. Thank you, Mr. Pankaj Dharkar, the President of SOCAM James, my dear friend Neeraj Arodaji, Ahmed, and IT team, Maninder Saniji, for making all these efforts and making this a webinar series to be a successful event. And my friends, Shamiji, Punitji, and I will say Sanjayji, the respective chapter chairman of Indian Institute of Architects, Northern chapter, Haryana chapter, and Punjab chapter. Nevertheless, my friend, great friend, Anupam Mittal, who is now chairman UP chapter of SOCAM James Elect. I think it is one of your first webinar and presence jointly here, though we know each other very, intensively, and he is a global architect. Thank you very much. And I am really honored to have my friend, architect Dr. Jeva Pioz from Spain, Madrid. Hi, Pioz. It's a great pleasure to be with you here after, we've been watching you together for last 30 years now, and great of you that you have accepted the invitation and here with us. And my friend Farid from Dubai, a global architect, won many design competitions, working all over, and a very passionate architect, and have been here for 3-4 visits in India and had a lot of other interaction with him. So thank you for it to be here with us. And lastly, not the least, the exclusive lady we are honored to have with us is architect Lalita Charani, who is though Bombay based, but she is an international acclaimed award winner. She is also with us. So thank you to all the panelists, eminent panelists here. And now I will request to put the video on and just initiate the dialogue how we are taking through with Smart Habitat Foundation and SOCAM James. Thank you. Can you start the video?
Welcome to this series of 10 webinars by Smart Habitat Foundation. Smart Habitat Foundation is an excellence for art and architecture and for human settlement, initiated by Creative Group and Professor Charanjit Shah. For the last 4 years, we are working on various aspects of art, architecture, we have various debates with students of architecture and teachers of architecture colleges, so that the interface between the practice of architecture and the teaching methodology could be understood. We have various like Indo-Russian conclave, and it's like a global debates by global architects and also allied professionals like PMC, project management consultants, construction management consultants, financial management consultants, quality management consultants, structural engineers, MEP, architecture, plus art and sculpture put together. We have the Vice President, Mr. Dr. R.S. Sodhi, Gurpreet Shah. We have advisory in terms of more than 400
understanding of the
professionals,
building industry.
including
So
various
we
more
have
than 200
400
head of the
expert
departments of
advisors with
School of
us, which
Architecture,
are
plus
like all
practicing
eminent architects
architects,
and
then the green
professionals, and
consultants, structural
more than
engineers,
200
MEP
head of the
consultants,
department from
all
various
the
schools of
eminent
architecture,
personalities
and
are
also MEP
participating in giving
consultant,
the
financial
advice in terms
consultant.
of
All these
creating
are practically
green
advisors to
Indian
us to
sustainable
make a deal so
architecture,
that
and
we are
these
able to
are the
create a
glimpse of
holistic
the various workshops we
architecture.
stud, you know,
A
we
to
teach the
Z
students, you
architecture,
know, for about
where
15
we are
days
partnering with
in-house, and
all
then
people
they do
and
the publication.
understanding
So
how to
all
take the
these
larger, bigger
things are being
project
done
with better
at Smart
understanding. So
Habitat
these are some of
Foundation
the
with the help of
workshops which
all
have
my
been conducted
colleagues,
by
architects friends, and
earlier
other
from
professionals. Now
Smart
we
Habitat
club with
Foundation
SOCAM
and
James.
like
You see
Indo-Russian
Mr.
Conclave and
Pankaj
other
Dharkar,
workshops of
Mr.
15 days workshop for
Hiranandani,
the
Mr.
students where we teach
Menon,
them
all are now
for
clubbed
15
together,
days and
including the
then they
support
make
of
a lot of
ASHRAE,
publications as well.
ISHRAE,
Now we are
even
very
FSAI,
fortunate.
and
We are
all
now
those allied
associated with
bodies are
SOCAM
also
Gems.
coming
We have an
forward,
MOU with
and
them,
we are having a
and we are
joint
now having
platform and
10
now created
webinars
these 10
together with
webinar discussion
SOCAM
on
Gems
various
to
elements of building
create a
industry in terms of
absolutely
creating
clean,
that sort of an
sustainable,
understanding
smart,
so that we have the
absolutely
interface
human
between all of
settlement.
them
So this is
together.
an effort. We are trying to do this, and we had on the 8th the first webinar, and today is the second webinar
These are some of the
after
publications we have
the
made
Corona
for
19.
publication for
So we
evolution
are
of
very
steel.
glad
We have also
today
done
to
on
have all
smart
of you here
city
and
planning, and that is
have
all what we
dialogue
do. And now
on
we hope
what
for
is
a very
the
large
like
platform with SOCAM and Smart Habitat Foundation to take it further. Thank you very much.
new human settlement trends, and that is what perhaps we need to see. These are some of the publications, and this is how we have now have a larger platform with Anup Mittalji from SOCAM, Neeraj and Pankaj. We are trying to expand the horizon of understanding in a very realistic and larger aspect. So thank you very much. Now I will, I think, take over from here, welcoming my speakers. And one by one, I think what we will do is that I'll introduce one of the speakers with a question again, and introducing him, putting a question, and then 3 4 minutes every speaker may take in the first round. Then we'll have another second round where we'll have again questions and answers from you people, and then we'll take questions from the audience, the people who are attending this webinar. So my first, I welcome my friend Shamit Manchanda, my chairman of Northern Chapter, and a very personality, an expert. Now I think he's with the hospitals, I suppose, because that's the greatest opportunity now. But looking into various aspects, Shamitji, uh, what do you think that do we need to relook at the planning norms and the building codes for development of new towns and cities? What do you see with maybe post-corona or before corona? Will it find major changes in the human settlement? Over to Shamit ji.
Good evening, Professor Shah, for inviting me to this webinar, Smart Habitat Foundation, SHM. It's a very interesting topic. We are living in very interesting times, and how our cities develop and going forward, it is going to be very interesting to observe and to formulate policies. Cities, as we all know, thrive upon opportunities for work.
मेरी बैंडविड्थ प्रॉब्लम है क्या पीछे रहना अब ये बताओ
Uh,
bandwidth problem too.
entertainment, availability of goods and services. And if this fear of the pandemic becomes the norm, these cities are going to become bland and antiseptic. This infection could go away in 6 months, a year, 2 years. It's anybody's guess. But one thing is sure that we will have to alter the way that we work and live. If not COVID-19, we could be faced with another such pandemic in the near future. Some say that this is a man-made virus. Bio warfare is a thing which we will have to live with. So if it was natural or man-made, this is a threat that we have to now start living with it. How, as I foresee, how things, this pandemic will change how we look at our norms. We will have to look in terms of densities in a city. Till now, we've looked at greater the density, the more efficient the planning was supposed to be. We spent lesser on commuting times. We spent lesser on the fuel that we spent in commuting. We will also have to relook at mobility. Mass transit could take a back seat. Till now, mass transit was something which was essential because we were saving fuel. People traveling in a bus was much more efficient than two people or a single person traveling in a car. But because of social distancing, the number of people traveling in a single bus could be vastly reduced. So based on that, we could also have to rethink on our transit oriented development policies. uh, are they viable in terms of this safety of our lives? So many people coming in and working in a very confined environment. Maybe we will have to look at pedestrianization in a newer aspect. Cycling to work could take a front seat. uh, how we look at urban planning and zoning is going to change. Mixed land use, where we can easily travel to our place of work, could be the answer. How we look at individual building design is going to be another factor, be it commercial spaces or residences or hospitals. Uh, we could be looking at decontamination areas within every building. The moment you enter a house, maybe you require a place where you can change, and the clothes and the shoes that you've been wearing when you had gone out. Similarly, in a commercial space or an office environment, seating, how close the seatings have to be, those will have to be relooked. Uh, Proper housing for all is going to be a very important factor, because slums are, as we know, as we see the case of Dharavi, where there has been a huge outbreak of this COVID-19 cases. We can't afford to be sitting and lagging behind in providing proper water, sanitation, and housing for everybody. So these are going to be very interesting times, and how we are going to look at. In terms of details, we'll have to relook at a 10 passenger lift could now maybe only work for only 4 passengers because of social distances. So number of lifts required might go up. Uh, as I said, mixed use policies are going to be more prevalent. We will need to repurpose our buildings uh, in terms of how where can we convert these buildings into isolate in case we are required, say a large convention center. How do we change it into a isolation facility, an office space which can be converted? Maybe we need to provide a bed elevator in all the buildings as an essential element. Number of persons permitted to work in a factory or office at any given time will have to be defined and become mandatory. Distancing norms in every aspects of the build design that we do will have to be taken into consideration. And going to a topic that is of more interest to me in terms of hospitals. Hospitals in particular will have to cater to this kind of situation every now and then. Even if we, as everybody says, even if we control it now, there could be a second wave of infections, it could be a third wave of infections, or as I said earlier, there could be another kind of virus that might come up. So even in terms of designing a hospital, we need to create screening zones before a person enters into a hospital. So those norms will have to be set up. Hospital facilities will have to be planned in such a way that they can be easily converted into isolation facilities. You cannot afford to have run an isolation ward for the as a whole hospital, because in negative pressure you are actually creating an area which is using 100% fresh air kind of a system. The energy costs will go crazy, so you'll have to design systems that can be normally in times of no infection work as a positive pressure areas, but when the requirement comes, they can be easily converted into an isolation zone. Maybe design each hospital needs to have a wing which can be easily isolated, so that a complete building can be isolated within a hospital complex. So similarly, a lot of things will have to be rethought and repurposed, and the norms will have to be relooked at when we go in for future development.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Good, good. Thank you. Great, great. There are issues which are, I would say, known and unknown. There are many things which are yet to be known, and the unknowns are very difficult to be anticipated. And thank you, Shamit. And my friend, architect Puneet Sethi is there, who is the chairman of Haryana chapter, Indian Institute of Architects, a very vibrant personality, and yeah, he's in practice for the last now more than 25 years, and he is very passionate about ethnic and architecture, which belongs to our heritage, and many more other things put together, which are like belongingness to the people and the place. So I would request you, can you elaborate how can the current urbanization trends in our mega cities be historically understood so as to plan the strategies for the future? To Puniji, can you address this question and highlight on these
Yes,
issues?
yeah, thank you. I think it's a very interesting question, and you're looking at the entire situation from the macro level. The mega cities of India today are under a really horrible kind of threat. Okay, so let's try and put the historical perspective together, wherein let's look at how our mega cities have developed over the past, say, 1 century. If you just take our memory back, and each decade has been associated with some phenomena or a particular theme. If you recall history, almost all decades have been related with some phenomena or some theme. For example, the first 2 decades of the 20th century were characterized by famine, plague, the influenza epidemic, etc. The 1920s were associated with the agricultural depression. The 30s and the 40s were associated with war, the Indian freedom movement picking up, and then the eventual partition of the subcontinent. And thereafter, after independence, the 50s saw a planned development phase coming into the country. During the 60s, we saw the emergence of the new urban centers in the backward areas, as well as concentration of urban development in the near the big cities. In the 70s and the 80s, the mega cities and the class 1 cities in India began to grow at a much faster rate compared to the other towns and villages. But in the 90s, the million plus cities took over. So the number of million plus cities began to increase in India. And by the turn of the millennium, we almost had, I think, 35 million plus cities. And the turn of the century also brought more migration and very steady urbanization. So what does this historically, what does this perspective give us? That we must understand that in India, the urbanization is purely based on subsistence. So it's based on subsistence, where rural people migrate to the urban centers looking for employment. They do not necessarily migrate looking for a better living environment, health, or education, or anything other than that. What they're looking for is employment. And as a result, mega cities are exploding and exploding with the population, while the smaller towns have begun to stagnate. Now, this has been the more or less the picture of Indian urbanization over the last few decades. And simultaneously, if you see, the quality of living environment in the mega cities is declining by the day, whether it's pollution, whether it's traffic, whether it's solid waste management, whether it's security, whether it's health. All the aspects have taken a beating, and a big time beating. In fact, the COVID phenomena has actually brought all these deficiencies in our cities to the fore. We are now confronted with the reality that yes, our cities are not up to the mark. And this lockdown, I'm very sorry, I really feel bad. This lockdown has also demonstrated the inability of our mega cities to look after the migrant population. They are nowhere. We are unable to look after them from the economic point of view. We are even unable to make them feel at home. They are living far away from home, and the city in which they work, they toil, they put their heart and soul, we are unable to look after them, and we have no mechanism by way of which we'll be able to cater, and our cities are posing a very big question mark. So I think it seems our mega cities have kind of given up on the migrant population, which is to me a very, very disturbing phenomena looking at what is
Yeah.
happening here. I think it answers your question. Just the
Yeah,
perspective I
yeah,
thought,
yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
immediately came to my
Absolutely.
mind. I stop here.
I agree with you, Puneet, and that is what we are facing now. What is happening is that we have all opened our offices, but what is happening is that most of our staff is either from Noida or from Gurgaon, and they live far away, and it's very difficult to manage things around. And perhaps this is one of the very major issue which I think we need to be enlightened with and see that how the transformation of our mega cities has to be done now. That's very fantastically done up, Puneet, and I can really visualize the way you are thinking on even our migrant labor. All those things are the bigger issues. Slums, yes, I agree. Thank you very much. Now, I will come to my third speaker, and I know him for the last more than 30 years, perhaps, and that is Dr. Javier Pios from Spain, Madrid, a very good friend of mine, absolutely sustainable from quote of his heart. He is a doctorate from Columbia University in New York. He did his master's, and then he's done wonderful projects around the globe, and probably he's one of the great guys who's done a lot of work in India. In Chandigarh, Chennai, and Pune, and many other places. And he is a pioneer in research in Bohemian architecture. So I would request that before he starts, let the organizer start his video as an introduction. So Harinderji, you please start his video, then he can take it further. Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Pios. Can we have the video on, please?
Yes, it's starting.
issue on an issue on video, then I would request Dr. Pyos to speak on. Neelaji?
Sir, video is working.
So you can speak on that till they get it. Can you put the audio of Dr. Pyas on, please?
Dr. Pyos, are you there? So maybe you can ask the next question from architect Fareed. Meanwhile, Dr. Pyos joins us.
Yes, Dr. Pio, but something happened and I lost the connection, and I trying to get again connected.
Okay. So meanwhile, you can ask the question from either Mr. Fareed or Architect Mittal. Architect.
Okay, that's good. Okay, I'll do that. I shift over. Please put the screen on.
Okay.
Yeah. I have another very globally acknowledged my friend.
You're cutting off.
Okay. I ask you, Fareed, Architect Fareed Ismail. He is the founder principal of X Architects Dubai, and he's won many different competitions the globe. He is, who's planned many cities. So, Fareed, you have the exposure around the entire globe, particularly in the Middle East. You have been designing, the city planning and visualize the change in the mindset of people related to city planning. Right? Yeah, Fareed, can you just elaborate upon this and through your various experiences? How do you see, various projects which have been done earlier and now? What do you think that how do you reinvent the new trends?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Shah, for this question.
Yes,
Definitely,
Fareed.
it's a very relevant question. I think. I mean, looking, always looking when you look at the plannings, almost the planning principles has been somehow known. If you almost read any books about walkability, book about sustainable master plan, books about the public transport or density, and so all of that it's something is very much known, but it's unfortunate that you very rarely see it implemented in our cities, and because of different reasons. Sometimes it's the the demands of different utility requirements. So every utility works very independent. For example, instead of they working together in a holistic way. So therefore, you simply get a different street sections that maybe it's not very much pedestrian oriented rather than more utility oriented, and so our city somehow has reached to where we are now. I mean, definitely we all rely a lot on infrastructure, and infrastructure is kind of part of our everyday life. Cars being very particular, and somehow it has been quite very difficult to change certain principles, because it has become for people, sometimes for the authorities, to see the way it is. That's the perfect, or kind of that's the optimum way to be. um, Having said, I mean, somehow this the last 1 month, 1.5 months of coronavirus and the virus and so on, it has taught us that things could happen, change could happen in a very fast and in a very quick way, and the culture shift could even happen with it. I mean, one of them is this idea of social distances, and then all of a sudden we all have to work from home, and we have to deliver cities and architecture uh, with different people collaborating exactly the same way we're doing now, over series of conference talks, and without really meeting, which I think 2 months ago it was impossible. So for 1 hour meeting we used to drive, I don't know, 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes to go and to come back. So these shifts definitely will start to have impact, I think, on the way the cities are, and the way we define the program of the city, the way we define this is an office space, this is a house, this is a living room. Um, we all are working now from our houses. We all working from our living room, from bedroom, where it is becoming our office. Definitely communication or community kind of commuting has dropped dramatically, I would say. So people rely less, I would say, on commuting, and they're starting to rely more on technology. And uh, almost this speed of change was kind of a phenomenon the last 2 months. So I see definitely moving forward. You see that these changes, and it's being more acceptance to the cities, to the designing the cities, to designing architecture. Of course, one is to look at it from the well-being and so on. And the other side, it becomes the issue of sustainability, and the sustainability, whether you look at it from a bigger perspective. So rethinking of the mobility. What is the new mobility? Rethinking of the density. What is the right density that we could use? Is really people we should start to densify the cities more and more, or whether that the suburb could become a place that could take part of in the economy for a community. If people could work just by having a simple internet and a laptop, and have the efficiency that you have, that going to the office, maybe less people that needs or they're required to come to the cities, where the rural or the suburb areas or countrysides, it becomes more active and more involved in the development of the economy, and as a result, definitely this all of that will start to have an impact on the way we design our infrastructure, the way we design our cities, therefore would impact the way we live. I mean, definitely I see, yes, there would be uh, changes, and I think these sudden changes, many of it is going to continue. And one
Yes.
particular thing is this idea of working from distance. Uh, and yeah, so I hope that I answered your
Yeah,
questions.
I think it's really absolutely correct and fantastically, deliberated. I wish we could find these changes in our physical planning as well, because the bureaucracy or politicians sometimes do not let us work as per the aspirations of the people. and there is a confrontation on all aspects. But definitely, I think I'll ask you another question in the next round on the public spaces, because you are one of the great masters of creating public spaces and museums around the globe. So we'll, I think, that talk to you on that in the next session. Now I'll move on to architect Lalita Tharani, who is a very eminent personality. I happened to meet her about 3 months back at Marriott Hotel in Delhi, where she made a presentation, which was really, I admire you, and you had the galaxy of projects, particularly onto that modernization into the religious buildings, like, your mosque. I was really fascinated to see that. And she is with, as a principal architect, collaborative architecture, and has partnership with Majid Ahmed. I happen to meet him also. And they are gold medalists in their field, won many global competitions. More than 55 awards have been given to them. It's really something which is fascinating. Welcome, Lalita ji. And I would request you that though you have also worked in public spaces, and can you hear? It's okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, I lost you at the end over there.
Yeah, okay. What, according to you, would be the emergent pattern of housing in urban centers post-crisis, or in the pandemic, would have little impact? No, let's understand from you what is the sort of realistic impact on our planning norms in terms of housing, in terms of even, I would say, in open spaces, community spaces. How do you see the future of architecture and the human settlement? Yeah, over to
Firstly,
you.
thank you. Firstly, good evening to all the participants and the panelists across from the country and across the globe today. We getting connected on this via this digital world, and thank you, Charanjit ji, for such a lovely introduction and inviting me to be a part of this array of eminent panelists today. Now, before I really go and answer this question, I would kind of like to briefly run through the tasks we have at hand. If somebody could kind of play my presentation, my PPT that I have sent, which is the urban and rural. Can you just play that for me? Yeah. No, not this one. The other one. Can that be played, please? Yep. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, perfect. Okay, now see, as it's clearly visible from the slide that's been shared, that we can see the world population, which is kind of split in half, 50% and 50%. Now, 50% concentration, as you can see, is in the Asian side of the countries, which is India and the East Asian countries and China and things like that. In fact, Asia has about 30% of world land area and 60% of the it kind of hosts 60% of the population. India being particularly having the major problem being because India occupies about just 2.4% of the total land area, but kind of supports 16.7% of the world population. So it's a very lopsided balance that we have globally. In fact, architect Puneet also touched on this mega city topic, which if you could go to the next slide, I will talk about that, please. Next slide. So here we can easily see the way the balance is between the rural and the urban population. If we see from 1950, wherein the rural population was about 70%, versus the urban population, which was 30%, and then coming to 2010, we were almost equivalent, 50%, 50% kind of rural and urban population. But what has been projected till 2050 is that we are going to completely reverse, and we are going to have about 70% urban population versus 30% rural population. And looking at the lower half of the slide, where we can see how the megacities have been developing across the developed nations and the undeveloped nations. If you see in the same time span, when we had about, in comparison to the 70% urban population that we had, the megacities were about two numbers in the developed worlds, and about one number in the developing countries. Now coming back to the same time span, where we were having an equal population, about 50%, 50% rural and 50% urban population, the scenario changed about with the development of megacities being about six numbers in the developed nations to about 19 numbers in the developing nations. Similarly, now the way it's been projected is that when we are going to reverse completely, having the urban population for about 70%, and at that point of time, if you look at the basic graph that is there down, the wedge of the megacities remain the same in the developed nations, whereas in the developing nations, it kind of really kind of graphs up to 30 numbers, which is a huge escalation. This, if you also see that, considering that the rural population is not, which shows kind of the migration of the rural population is happening more in the developing nations than in the developed nations overall. So obviously, considering the developing nations generally have a lot of pressure on their infrastructure and things like that, considering that also we are going to face, and we have to be prepared further, so that our megacities can take this burden that's going to happen by 2050. You can cut the slide, and now you can stop the slide. Sure, you can stop the slideshow. I'll just take it from there. So now, if we really, I mean, looking at these numbers, I really don't have to kind of impress upon anyone. Considering with the most optimistic view in with these numbers, is highly challenging. In fact, it's almost impossible to meet the housing needs if we continue to follow the path that we have been treading till date. A lot of people might latch on to the technology to resolve housing crisis and define a new pattern, like what happened in case of Kishu Kurokawa and the Japanese metabolist movement. They tried to, do that immediately after World War II. I'm sure we all know about the Nakakin capsule tower, which has been kind of due for demolition right now. Unfortunately, the world's population grew much faster than the technology could really keep pace with. So I kind of remain a tech agnostic in spite of the speculated possibilities of rapid prototyping or digital fabrication or 3D printing, so to say. Unless, in fact, looking at the overall scenario, the social contract of architecture is by far going to dominate the direction of discourse and praxis in coming years, which has been kind of neglected by all us architectural practice and architects for a long, long time. This perhaps may be the only way we could kind of solve the puzzle of providing housing for so many people in the megacities to come, and at the same time create sustainable cities. Social distancing is kind of, as being the norm as of today, is it's kind of a privilege to the middle class and upwards, and it has been kind of underscored and amplified with the exponential surge of the positive cases in the cities and slums, as in case of Mumbai, where I live. in particular, because we can see that we are in the midst and the thick of it. In fact, this pandemic has nothing to do with the poor people. It is a result of the rich's fondness of exotic meats, and pangolin and bats precipitated these crises. Whereas the poor and the most vulnerable are unfortunately taking the brunt, kind of the brutal brunt of this whole episode. As we would kind of all agree that the healthcare will kind of dominate every nation's defense strategies coming here on, providing kind of respectable housing shall be, and in fact should be, the focused strategy of post-COVID metropolises, which will in turn transpose them into the livable cities. That's my take on the mega cities way forward.
Thank you, thank you, thank you very much, Lalita ji. And Dr. Pyos, can you now be with us? And I think we are ready with your presentation as well. But you live in a walkable city, and we say, that Spain, Madrid, Barcelona, these are the places where it is absolutely green, sustainable, and walkable cities. And your take, you said that should mega city face the challenge of evolution of cities without cars? Madrid, one of the most sustainable and walkable city in the world. What do you feel after COVID-19? You really suffered. You had maximum casualties and maximum people who are, with this coronavirus. Do you think that the Madrid planning in terms of walkable and cluster was helpful in that? And then the magnitude of cities which we have in Delhi or somewhere, what does really affect? It's like low-rise, high density is more suitable than the high-rise and high density. Can you elaborate upon that with your experiencing of and also on base sustainable architecture? Welcome, Dr. Pyas.
Thank you, Mr. Shah. Thank you very much. Sorry, because before something happened to my connection and I lost you full. I couldn't see, I couldn't listen to you. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I wish to give my thanks to the organizers, my Habitat Foundation, ASSOCHAM, the Council for Green and Eco-Friendly Movement, and Indian Institute of Architects, Northern Punjab and Haryana. And also, I wish to thank to my partners, Mr. Shah, Mr. Machandra, Mr. Seri, Mr. Goel, Mr. Tarami, Mrs. Tarami, Mr. Bail, and Mr. Mittal for sharing us your ideas. Well, I believe that a few months ago, it was almost impossible to imagine the actual pandemic situation. It is a really, really strange thing. And I believe that most of us would have thought sometimes about the quality of our cities. Maybe some of us like the city, or some of us we don't like the city. But thinking about the possibility to change something or not, because maybe pandemic is here like an accident, a brief accident, or maybe pandemic is here to stay between us long time. Then thinking about the possibility to change something or not, most of us, we should have arrived to a very sad conclusion. It is not possible to change anything because nobody wishes to change. It is the reality. I believe that the developers are very happy right now, developing more and more neighborhoods, tons of massive concrete. Of course, car sellers are very happy also, selling more and more vehicles. There are thousands and thousands of vehicles running all over our streets. Air conditioning sellers are also very happy, selling more and more machines, and so on every day. But unfortunately, people is not very happy, because people is forced to spend their lives suffering endless traffic jams every day and wasting a large amount of hours inside cars, almost 50% of their life inside a car. But right now, I believe there is a new opportunity to think about cities in a different way, because approximately 75% of the land in cities is used by roads and streets. this enormous large area is now under pandemic, under lockdown, is now almost empty. So maybe if pandemic has come here to stay with us, it could be possible to change something and to rethink about the new idea. Maybe one is the city without cars. Maybe it could be possible also a new relationship between architecture, city, and nature. Could be. But really, looking at our reality of our cities and mega cities, it sounds at present like a chimera. It is not possible to do anything. But if pandemic has come to stay without us, and streets and roads are fully empty day per day, pues maybe it brought us a window of opportunity, at least a window for thinking with an open mind, thinking with an holistic point of view, or thinking with a new green philosophy, or thinking also what can we learn from nature? I mean, learning from the logic of nature, not only using nature, just thinking from the logic of nature. Of course, I am not saying that to change everything in one day, it is not possible, even in one decade. But now we have the opportunity to start the first steps, at least thinking about the first step. Maybe pandemic has opened our eyes to our reality, the reality of our cities. And maybe we are now ready to look at our cities with a new open minds. So, thinking about it, it will be possible in near future to find new sustainable solution, new smart habitats. My opinion is, and maybe it could be another comment, mega cities are over nature. Mega cities are conquering nature, are using nature. We are, human beings are over the nature and step top. It is an ugly mistake. We should learn to be and to live being one with nature, to be integrated with nature. It is not so easy. It's really very complicated how to do that. But we should learn what can we learn from nature, to be one with nature, not only to use nature. This is my key point. Thank you for your patience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piers. Thank you. Yeah, you are actually an inventor and a reinventor all the time. And in the next round, I think we'll talk about your bionic architecture, your skyscraper at Shanghai, and your experience working in India. It's really fantastic. And I could see that you are such a vibrant person. You can make things work anyway. That is what fascinating is all about you. I really love it. And that is the passion which we really share with each other. Thank you very much. Now, I, my very greatest of greatest friend and the UP SHM elect chairman, Shri Anupam Mittalji, and welcome to you. And see, he is a great researcher and a manifestation of many things put together, a great practitioner. And he has done a lot of research and also practiced monolithic concrete construction technology by passion. He is an expert in even I would say affordable housing. He understands all these things in a very holistic manner, including architecture and technology together. So I would request you, my dear, and he has a practice in Lucknow, Delhi, and I think in Pune as well, and globally. Affordable housing seems to be your favorite area of work. Do you see any upcoming trends which may lead to another scale of human settlement in mega cities? And this is one subject which we always talk about, and we have yet to find solutions for affordable housing from slum upgradation. And these are the major issues concerned with the mega cities where we think we must have a vision program. Yeah, I think we'll hear from my friend architect Anupam Mittalji. Please.
Very good evening. Very good evening to everybody. And thanks for inviting me to such a wonderful platform. Actually, I was listening to everybody, and I think whatever I'm doing, I'm getting all kinds sort of inputs from especially Mr. Puneet Sethi, he already talked about this lockdown thing where when these migrant people they don't find place to go. Lalita, you discussed about the population, about this urban and rural. Actually, your question, Tanjit sir, is regarding affordable housing, and my affordable housing subject is directly related to the migrant people, because for whom you design, for whom you do this affordable housing, urban poor one, and the rural migrants who are coming to the city. There's just one thing which the calculation, the chart shown by Lalita ji, that this the percentage of people who have migrated and will be migrating. I treated today's after post pandemic. I treat this a reverse migration. I can see it, I can feel it, I can read it. I wrote it about, and I'm rightly got involved in this settlement by the government recently to make the settlement for the migrant people. So there is the subject has got changed. This affordable housing is now have a very different situation, and it is going to have a very different outlook from now onwards. The way Mr. Puneet Sethi said about this people in like especially Mumbai, nowhere to go. The people from UP and Bihar, they found nowhere to go, and at this situation, they are running. They are even in Lucknow highway. We saw the Kali Pili, this taxi from MH number coming to Lucknow to drop the people from Mumbai. Day before yesterday, I saw. Even a scooty from MH number came to Lucknow 3 days back. They're coming from Mumbai on a scooty. Can you imagine that? This is reverse migration, and this is going to lead to the near new kind of affordable housing. The third thing about Mr. Farid, who talked about the technology, and this is my favorite subject. When I started using this monolithic construction technology as my subject for affordable housing. So I think that new trend will be for the people who are coming back to the cities, the smaller cities, towns, and villages. What I see, the affordable housing is not going to be in Mumbai or Delhi. It is going to be in the B towns, in the B cities, and maybe towards the highways, towards the incoming roads of the smaller cities. In fact, there are two kinds of migrant people. One is the family who are the urban people, or urban labor. Another is the single people who went to the urban cities and started got these kind of Dharavi and all kind of settlements. So now what is going to come, because the subject is about the mega cities and the kind of settlement and the new trend. I'll not drift away from the topic. I like to put that the new trend will be the different kind of settlement, but not in the center of the cities, not in the mega cities, but in the town areas, and that will be housing the people from that town area, and the construction sites and the developing sites where we need them to be there. It may have a kind of settlement which has to have some kind of traffic planning, urban planning, their movement with relation to the developing part of the city. In Mumbai, say Navi Mumbai is getting developed, so you have to have a settlement nearby so that you can house those people, settle them there, so that they can be the part of that construction activities. I'm going to see a very much the big change in the kind of construction, then the participation of the laborers in the future. That is going to lead the involvement of technology a lot. That was the reason when I started working on that monolithic construction technology almost 11 years back. And today it has been adopted by most of the projects in cities, in high-rise, in low-rise, for affordable housing, even for premier housing also. If I'm able to answer your question, or if I have just drifted away.
Absolutely, Anupam, great. Thank you very much. but I must say that, this is one of the very, relevant this thing for our country as creating really big bandwidth of affordable housing. But what I see is, talking to various real estate players and other players, what is happening around is that the land cost versus construction cost, and where we really need people, nearer to their place center, the land value is very costly, and we are unable to create that sort of a facility. But anyway, we will elaborate in the next, on our deliberation. And now, I would not say last but not the least, but I would say our leader, our one of the architects, very rare architects who are actually involved into smart cities, Mr. I would say architect Sanjay Goel. Welcome you, and he's our chairman of Punjab chapter, Indian Institute of Architects. And only, I would say, if my knowledge is correct, he is the only architect to be director and in Ludhiana Smart City project. It's an honor that you are leading and you are giving your vision as an architect, because perhaps architects need to have more responsible position, so wherein they can really contribute what they really mean to say and what they mean to execute. So I really appreciate you and your positioning in Ludhiana as one of the key person to adopt smart city projects. What you perhaps, I would say that perhaps you are the first nominated architect, and how do you get selected, and why architects are missing in all these SPVs of the other cities? What is your opinion? How do you really get into it, and how can you inspire the architecture fraternity to come forward for this? Sanjay ji, please.
Thank you, Dr. Charanjit Singh Shaji. Namaskar to all of you in the panel and all the attendees. So it is not a big achievement, I will like to say. I am just one of the director into special purpose vehicle created for upcoming every smart city in India. So I think many architects from many cities can join the SPV of their respective cities once they are in excellent in touch with their district administration and their state government. It is not a tough task because the role is definitely of a planner or an architect into the upcoming smart cities or whatever we are expecting, even the smart towns and smart villages in the coming times. We should not be shy. As I have seen, most of the architects in India, they are not interfering into their city planning, city designing, although they are hopefully very busy in their own buildings and own infrastructure. You should be taking interest. It is the need of the hour. If our cities are not livable, then what is the fun of doing the practice and stepping time over there? We know that 90% or more than 90% of Indian cities are having a lot of congestion. Already for the last 5 years into the smart city mission, we are all planning how to decongest the cities. The traffic is horrible, whether in Mumbai, Calcutta, Chennai, anywhere in Bengaluru, Delhi, everywhere, and bumper to bumper driving. We were definitely trying our best to decongest the cities under the smart city umbrella. How under pan city initiatives we can bring so many changes, because there were no distancing. I will like to say social distancing even in 2015 onwards, when smart city mission came into existence in India. Now it's 5 years over, and part 2 is going to start for smart city mission. Although COVID-19 is a very horrible and bad story for all of us, but social distancing is going to teach a lot of things to us, not only for human beings, but for the vehicles as much. We have seen the rising pollutions in our city, whether it was air pollution, water pollution, and noise pollution. And people have seen the difference due to COVID lockdown period, that how even they themselves can minimize the pollution level. We have seen the contrast after 25th March and before 25th March. The kind of difference in our cities, in our environment has come up. As far as SPV is concerned, it is there in every city. It is not a big thing. I hope more such architects will be taken into the decision making by the district and state governments. SPB is comprising, we all know, of all the nominee members from center government, from state government, and from the district administration. So all a team of 12 to 15 experts take all the major decisions, which are then transferred to the limited company to doing the needful at the grassroots level. So these are my inputs, Dr. As you have asked, Dr. Jarhi Shaji. So I think previous speaker has already covered many excellent points pertaining to urbanization and difference and the migration of people from villages to towns to urban areas and the metropolis citizen. We have seen the migration population of migrants, how they are moving now in the crisis from the metros to their villages. I think Dr. Pios and architect Madam Lita and other experts have covered the topic nicely. Even Puneet and Shamit have spoken very well with context to the today's topic. I am thankful to the team SSM and team Habitat Foundation for doing this seminar. And Dr. please.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. Thank you very much. You know, there are not many things we can talk about, but I think we certainly limit our scope in terms of city planning and in terms of city consists of infrastructure, and as rightly said by Dr. Pure, 70% of the area is practically going into roads, transportation, other things put together, and then I say large intermodal hubs, which we're talking about. Then we initially for the last now more than 10 years, we are also talking about various intermodalities into railway stations and then transforming our railway station into airports. I don't know what the airports would be transformed into today with this coronavirus. So these are the things when we're talking about distancing. What is the term of open spaces which will be now reinvented? What is the scope of large malls, public areas, maybe cinema halls, maybe other theaters, museums? All these are some of the it's like functionality and space design. And my friend Shamiti is a very experienced person in this, who can talk about the various space modalities into making some sort of a code distinction in terms of various city planning distribution of land use. What do you think the next generation architecture would talk about? To Shamit.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shah. Very interesting question. How the next generation is going to look at basically is going to depend on how life is going to change after this pandemic. We'll have to have a renewed focus on design of individual buildings and public spaces, primarily because human beings are social animals and they need to have their social interaction with each other, but without being in cramped spaces. So our public spaces, our where we meet each other, where we interact with each other, be it from offices to malls or cinemas, how do we continue those activities without having to live in the fear of catching this virus? So life is going to change, and this is going to have an effect on our city planning as well. People are definitely going to take advantage of the work from home situation. People will possibly move out to smaller towns where the property rates are cheaper and they have a better quality of life. Proximity to living in a city is not going to be important anymore. So when the proximity to the city is not going to be there, that importance is not going to be there, the suburbs are going to disappear. So you'll have a city and then you will have these smaller villages where people are moving away. Obviously, these are people who can afford to move away. Social distancing, as Lalita ji very rightly said, is something that the people in the middle class and the upper middle class and above are able to afford. People living in lower income state of society, living in slums, they can't even afford to have this thing. So that way the land use, etc., will have to be relooked at. Demand for shared housing and co-working spaces will go away. We have to now start thinking about changing from what we used to call as redensification to something what we call de-densification. Lower the amount of people living in cities, as Dr. Pios very rightly said. We have to let go of this uh, need to control everything and to build more and more and start going back to living with nature. Once the de-densification happens, life in the cities will also improve. Uh, as we are seeing in Delhi, we never used to see blue skies. This pandemic has suddenly made the skies in most cities blue. We were I had forgotten what a blue sky looks like. I recently had traveled abroad and I suddenly saw that, okay, the sky is actually blue, which I had not seen in Delhi for years together. So we have to start living more sustainably. Our planning in terms of our land use has to promote de-densification, uh, be it housing, be it industrial development, be it commercial development. We have to start living in a sustainable manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shamidi. I think that's a real gimmick that we must be heard and we must make our existence felt that this is what is required all about. And I think we need to go back to history. We need to understand what is all nature about. You can see the sky now blue here in Delhi. I can see the stars. You know, my PM 2.5 is no more. It's below normal here. And I am not a passive smoker. All this is I could see. And as you have said, this de-densification will also impact on our large infrastructure growth and all those things we were actually mapping off. Can we really go back to history's Punitji? And will relevance of mutual shading, courtyard planning, narrow streets, chopals? No, what is is it relevant more so today in terms of creating that sort of, regenerating the heritage of yesterday? Punitji?
Yeah, thank you. Really, I can't say whether we'll be able to go back as deep into history as you're mentioning. But typically, I would always take cue from whatever has happened in the past before I look at what is going to happen in the future. Now, I am not a pessimist, and I'm not looking at this entire COVID phenomena with any kind of pessimism. I know a lot of lives are being lost across the world. There is going to be a major social and economic repercussions that we will all face. But notwithstanding that fact, we must also remember the last 102 years ago, the pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 came. It went away in 2 years, and the world moved on. And the most modern day city planning actually happened after that. The planning models that we adopt in India based on the British and the American systems are all post that. So I don't think the definition of man being a social animal ever was lost. I still don't agree with the social distancing as a phrase. If at all we need to call something, it should be called physical distancing, and it is more like a preventive measure than something which is going to be of permanent nature. I personally don't see this thing becoming permanent, and let's hope we don't lose too many lives in the world. Now, while this has given us time to think back and reflect under the beautiful starry blue skies, I think our planning norms, our planning principles, our planners need to look at cities in a much different way. For example, most planning exercises in India do not take into account the informal sector. Whereas we all know that the informal sector in our cities accounts for almost 50% of the economic functioning. Similarly, our planning norms do not take into account the migrant population, as which Anupam also said. The urban poor and the migrant workers, they somehow are totally lost in the land use planning systems that we have, which effectively means that we have to now start thinking about whether we continue with the top-down approach in planning, or we relook at our planning from the bottom-up perspective. I really don't know what the answer is going to be. I'm sure Sanjay would also agree with me that the smart city model today might become even more relevant, for the simple reason that if we can look at city planning from the bottom up approach, then you can actually get people to start planning for themselves. I understand the limitations of the bottom up planning also, because people are not very technologically or advanced. They do not understand planning. It cannot be very far sighted, but I think this is the right time, with all the technology, with all the data driven mechanisms that are being put in place. I think even the smart city model is now going to become even more relevant. So the change in mindset of our planners, the way we look at our migrant population, the way we treat them, the way our cities, when I say we, I mean our cities, the way we treat them has to change. These blue skies cannot remain blue forever, but I'm sure if we can take this extra bit of sunlight that is coming down with this UV radiation, remove all the the wrongdoings that we've had in our thinking process. I think that is what is important, and our planning must become inclusive. We must start looking at these people as part and parcel of the whole thing. And one major problem that has happened with our metropolitans, the way they have developed, is that we brought the economic growth. We call them the engines of economic growth, but they are based on highly capital intensive, knowledge based service sector, whereas the manufacturing sector is diminishing. It's going away from our mega cities, and this dichotomy, this urban rural dichotomy, is the root cause of our problem. So we have to look at this, and our lessons will come, as Professor Shah said, from history, and this is how we'll have to look forward. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you, Puneet, really indeed. And we hope that, I would rather now try to have some more eminent planners to be involved with the architectural fraternity, and with clubbing them as and through, like my Sanjay, Goyal, who is heading towards smart cities, this thing, ambitious project. This interaction would give us some sort of a pathway to make better cities of tomorrow.
Sure.
I would now put question to my friend Dr. Pios, who he is into bionic architecture, biological architecture, and biological structures in nature. Show architects any potential solutions for megacities growing? Is it possible to learn from nature and new targets of megacities and evolution according to nature laws? Everything is one. What you really take in, you're experiencing the botanical architecture, or I say biological architecture, or bionic architecture. How do you think that we get inspired from there to create, be with nature, and we create natural architecture and organic architecture? Dr. Pios.
Okay, thank you very much. Just one question: Are you going to run the video?
Yeah, that will be very good. I think
no, not the first one. Not the first one. The second one. Yes.
Yeah, if we can run the second video of Dr. Pios.
Yes, maybe no. Maybe if you can run.
The first one, any video which can be, we can put the video on, because both are very interesting and very knowledgeable, and to the point which we are talking about.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Then just a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Couple minutes to summarize. I have written some key sentences from, for example, Mr. Mittal, nice. Speak about urban models and single people. Or Mr. Goel, smart cities mission. You talk about water, air pollution. Or Mr. Mashanda Shamit, we are social animals, and we need interaction with other people. And also to talk about blue sky, green vegetation. But thinking of large cities, of mega cities, we have a problem. Step by step, we are losing our free movement. We cannot move from one side of the city throughout the sites freely. We cannot do that. Then, from my point of view, along the past decades, we have been using nature just to put trees in our gardens, trees in our planters, or plants in our planters, using nature to, and it is quite very beautiful because we like to live near the gardens or near our own garden, beautiful. But we have forgotten to learn from nature. In the video I have shown, I just try to show a small part what we can learn from nature. Of course, there are many main principles. I am researching about nature more than 40 years ago, no? And there are few principles very easy to apply. One of the principles is porosity. For example, when a forest is growing and a very large amount of trees are in a forest bush, suddenly some of the trees die and create large holes without vegetation. It is like an spongy situation, or like a system to survive for the trees. In our cities, to survive for the forest, in our city, we never do that. No? We put one building near the other building, near the other building, near the other building, and so on, so on, so on, so on. Maybe we put a couple gardens, but step by step, thinking in our people, we will pass in next 50 years from 7,000 to 50,000. The real problem are streets and roads. It is a real problem. The pressure of streets and roads is enormous, and it's not possible to move. Then, from my point of view, I would like to think about the alternative to create porosity in our cities, to recycle cities. As, for example, in my last project in Shimla city, we have many buildings built, and we have to recycle the building. We have not to demolish building to create new one, just to recycle. Then from my point of view, thinking on the new city, recycling will be a very easy, a clever issue to recycling, a recycled city. And the second one, porosity. And we must learn to live in our own neighborhood and to have all things in our neighborhood. Teleworking will help to us to do that very good. Mainly it's not easy as I said before, not easy, but we should learn. We should learn from nature. As soon we learn from nature, we will find solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Piaz. It's always been very inspiring to listen to you, and I do remember, when we were in Delhi and in Ghaziabad and other places, you made beautiful presentations here and shared your thought with we all people at the Indian Institute of Architects Forum. Thank you very much, Dr. Piaz. Now I think I'll club two speakers together, and my learned friend Fareed and Lalita ji, both are very fascinating and passionate architects on open spaces and religious centers and museums, mosques, and various more other public spaces. So Fareed, can you elaborate upon that? What is your intake on large museums and public spaces which you have designed, and like big piazzas or other things in terms of the new trends in architecture after this episode?
Well, yeah, I think it's quite a relevant question. Many public spaces, whether you look at museums or mosques or even shopping mall, if you want to see them as public space, or hotel lobbies, there are lots of controls on them. So it's not you as a people, you don't have, I would say, freedom to use these spaces. So you're either directed through certain routes. I don't know, you go to a museum and then you're leaving, you have to walk through certain commercial spaces in order for you to be able to exit. And even mosques, mosques from a kind of a space that historically it always has been a place for community. So it's a place people go there, people do their social interactions, a place people learn, educational space, and at the same time people say their prayer. It has become only space that is open 5 times a day, and people go pray and then it locks the door and no other activities happens. So it has changed its notion, its character as a public space, I would say, over time. Definitely that's something it's to come back. I mean, you have a lots of infrastructure, especially here in our part of you have lots of mosques, you have so many mosques, which definitely they could be used for many activities, but they're only open 5 times a day for half an hour, 2.5 hours, another 22 hours of the day is closed. So I think the challenge could be how you could really bring these buildings as part of the society, where it becomes really a real, I would say, definition of a public space where people could go, but it could be a place where people could go there to learn something, to interact with their neighbors, so it becomes a truly public space. It's somehow, even, I mean, it's the same process when you enter a museum or when you enter a hotel lobby. So you have to go through layers, I would say, of controls, and you have to go through layers of control in order to leave. So I think all of these layers and somehow those are even somehow creating this at this time of a pandemic, this kind of congestion that you have because of, again, it has been designed for that. So you enter a mall, you have to go through this narrow escalator and you have to exit into one retail shop where that's become your first destination, and that's the most expensive retail shop anyway to learn and so forth. So almost guiding people very in a very specific way to maximize the commerciality, it has becoming a problem. For example, the case of shopping mall, even in terms of museums, which all of them almost somehow start and end with shops. I think definitely you will see changes. I mean, very few times. I mean, especially in our part of here, very few times we have a kind of just an open piazza. This is an open piazza, it's an public space. You could go walk straight, walk the way you want to walk, sit, do whatever you want to do. We have very few space, I would say, that could really resembles that. And the program that has been doing that over the time has almost lost these kind of notion of it. And in many cases, because either because of the planning of the cities, like in very particular mosque has always been part of cities, part of the neighborhoods. Now it's typically mosque is surrounded by big parking space. So you have roads, and then you have parking, and then you have a mosque. So physically, the mosque is segregated from city. So it's not anymore welcoming naturally you into the mosque. So you have to at least walk 50 meters into kind of a harsh, I would say, parking environment to enter a mosque. So either that from the urban perspective or through the regulation, it has almost has changed this notion of public space. So I mean, I think moving forward, that's one of the challenge, that how to bring back this multi, I would say, diversity of programs into these spaces. So museum is not anymore a place I just go, I watch a couple of artifacts and I leave, but rather than a place that you could go watch artifact, but you could go
Absolutely,
for
absolutely,
seminar, you could go for work, and so on. And
absolutely correct. Yes, I appreciate, and you know,
hello, I can't hear you.
actually change the mindset of people. And I really passionate about your creations, which are really, very innovative. And perhaps you are the one who can really make a change in the reinvention of new architecture of tomorrow. What is your intake on, again, the public spaces? And let me a little shorter because and then question answers. Thank you.
Uh, yeah, I kind of lost you in the beginning. I did not hear your question completely, Mr. Shah.
You can.
Hello?
I just stating that you are experiencing about the open spaces, which probably what is the new trends which you possibly think and reinvent the public spaces or the public buildings, which you think will be the new trends.
Okay, now considering, I'm kind of going to take this from the perspective of the religious places as the public spaces, because you did mention that in the beginning while introducing me. So I'm going to take it from that perspective. What I feel is, while the cities may still kind of need some public and iconic architecture as a part of the new development going forward, I really can't foresee religious architecture taking the preeminent position in these urban insertions, at least for the immediate future. Religion and places of worship is kind of perhaps on the top of the list of casualties that this pandemic has had as of today. As architect Farid has already mentioned, we have all kind of seen the empty plazas of St. Peter's, empty Mecca, in our own country, cancelling of Ram Navami and other religious celebrations. Incidentally, in fact, even Hajj, which is a sacred pilgrimage of Muslims across the world, is most likely to be postponed this year, probably for the 40th time since the birth of Islam in 7th century. It is also interesting, rather, uh, uh, to the though the pandemic has kind of the interesting aspect is, though the pandemic has really disturbed the rituals and the usual business of religion, it has not shaken the faith globally. So, as in fact, as per the latest report, religion still continues to play a very defining role in our social construct, and kind of will continue to doing so in the city fabric. The sense of public and religious spaces is basically to get people together. That is what public architecture, religious architecture does. Or else, in kind of, it's going to lose its purpose if that's not the case. So I don't really believe that as a whole COVID-19 or other pandemics are really going to majorly affect the basis of designing public spaces as such, barring a few tweaks maybe to ensure public hygiene and health and etc. Um, you know, uh, touchless interfaces, which has always been around, but it kind of shall form probably the new norm in the public spaces post pandemic maybe, but it's all going to be for a short time, because as rightly put by architect Puneet, that this is what I also see, that this is temporary, this is not going to be permanent, it's not here to stay. So till such time it's going to definitely change and get tweaked. From redesigning of these spaces, when we kind of go and do wuzu in the mosque, to ringing of the bells in the of devotees in the temples, or to ritual of the holy water in the churches, and many such religious practices would kind of definitely go and undergo a temporary transformation. The changes that shall come into play as to how one interacts with all these public spaces and religious spaces would be more to do with the ritualistic conduct than the design itself of these spaces. So as you know, as
Okay,
once the
right.
vaccine is going to be found, as once a vaccine is going to be found and made available to all, this is just going to be another virus that the world would have encountered. So that's what it is. So I'm
Okay,
since we are
let
running
me,
short of
let
time,
me stop
yeah,
again
yeah,
and just skip through a little.
absolutely, yeah.
I
No,
have
no
two
worries.
more
I'm not going to show the
speakers.
presentation though. Sure, sure,
Okay,
sure.
can I can I request the other two speakers also, because it's already 7:45 and just another 5 minutes more, so that at least some questions could be taken up. My last two speakers are experts in creating infrastructure. Like Anupam Mittalji is doing a lot of railway stations and other projects of large scale, and Mr. Sanjay is helping making smart cities. My question to you is that what you see will be the new trends in creating redevelopment of the railway stations, and similarly to Sanjay ji, that what do you think the definition of smart city? Will it have some sort of a turnover, or or it will go as the vision earlier? So Anji, first you can elaborate upon the infrastructure, particularly on the railway stations.
Sorry, really, it's going to be a very challenging thing. Fortunately or unfortunately, we are designing Dadar Mumbai station. Imagine, which is having almost 12 lakh people per day, the footfall. And if you see any point of time, the people just rushing, social distance, you forget about social distancing. You forget about the physical distance. You can't have any kind of distance. So what happened, since we are in a design stage, before till the end of March, the design approach was something like the usual design with creating, the lot of big spaces and, which is the standards, which is convert to that for the standards. After that, when we actually gave time looking at the pandemic conditions and looking at the future planning, the first thing which we are doing is creating larger volumes and more number of entry exit points, which is beyond the specifications and beyond the requirement given to us. And I'm sure while going to give the presentation to the railway Ministry of Railway in near future, I'm going to stress upon the kind of approach which may give us little breathing space for the people to while entering and exiting the particular terminal. It will be difficult, but this kind of a little approach we are looking for as of now, and definitely these touch-free things and the kind of mechanical arrangements which can be accommodated in the future. As of now, yeah.
Yeah, Sanjay ji, you can elaborate more on this. What you see in Ludhiana actually needs today.
Right, sir. So your question was whether there will be any difference or not. Yeah, of course, there will be difference because in the decision making into the smart city mission, 99% people are not planners or architects. Although PMCs are there, they are doing their job. They are being dictated by government and bodies, central government and state government bureaucrats. I think the difference of COVID-19 life during the last 50 days has shown the difference. Even the non-architects and non-planners are now aware what kind of difference may be there in good planning and bad planning. Lot of vehicles, less vehicles, more people, less people, habitable areas, housing, number of migrants. So number of analyses, number of things have come in front of government during the last 50 days. I hope so that in the coming times there will be a change in the phase 2 of smart city mission for the next 5 years, and it will be more positive in the coming times.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. Now, I would now hand over to my friend Neeraj, who will take it over. Neeraj Arora ji, आप जरा देखो उसमें अभी एक तो can you put my friend architect Arun Virmani from Florida, USA? He wanted to share his thought, and after Arun Virmani finishes, then we can take quick questions, and then over to Neeraj ji for making the vote of thanks and also giving information about the other webinars. Neeraj ji.
Thank you, Charanjit ji. May I request Architect Arun Virmani to please speak? I think he has joined through his mobile, so his video will not be available. But if Mr. Arun Virmani is listening to me, he can speak on. He can. I mean, he is able to speak. His video will not be available. Architect Arun Virmani, please unmute yourself. I think he's not available. So I think he's not available. So I think we should we take one or two questions from the audience also?
Yeah, Neeraj ji, see, you can take these questions ahead if you wish.
Yeah. So there is one question for Architect Anupam Mittal. This is just a minute.
Yes.
There is one specific question for Architect Anupam Mittal. It is written that you said affordable housing will shift from main city to B town or rural area. Will it not impact their transit to main city, as most people habitating in affordable housing cater serve the needs of megacities? Anupam ji.
Just repeat once. I think I just missed one line.
Just a minute. So the question is, you said affordable housing will shift from main city to B town or rural areas.
Yeah.
Will it not impact their transit to main city, as most people habitating in affordable housing cater serve the needs of megacities?
Yeah, actually, affordable housing was never a main project. It was always a part of a project to house the people, the poor people, to cater the development part of the nation or the mega city. I think any development will have, it has to have this transit system intact. It has to come along with this development, because what's happening, the land costs are cheaper in the outskirts, and central of the city the land cost is higher. So you cannot have an affordable housing in the centers. You have to have affordable housing in the outskirts. So you have to create an transit system which can make them coming to the central part of the city, or the the urban part of the city, so that they can work, they can earn, and at the same time affordable housing can cater the purpose of its development.
Sir, another thought was that if you are looking at that we are saying that the population will shift from mega cities to the B class cities. So don't you think that this reverse migration is a scary situation where there will be a scarcity of skilled workforce in the metro cities, as we are seeing our labor is transforming for our urban areas, and they are moving to the rural area. So there will be a lack of skilled labor for the industries, for the construction work, all those things. Don't you
Uh,
see that?
I'll put it in a different way.
What is your opinion in that?
I'll put it in a different way. The human value in India was always less. That's why these Dharavi and those kind of settlements are coming up. If you need people, you have to make them comfortable. You have to make them happy. You have to create an habitable, sustainable living conditions to make them work for your projects. So the people who are not going to come back, I'm sure there will be a percentage people who are not going to come back. They will try to create their own working condition in the rural areas. That will help the rural areas to develop in on their own way. At the same time, the technology will replace people in the mega cities. That's why I was talking about this monolithic construction technology and all, where labor requirement is less and where more of a mechanized system. So what's going to happen? This is just my view, that cities and the bigger projects, the technology will replace people in some level. At the same time, the skilled people coming back to the rural areas or the town area will may be able to maybe help developing that rural areas and the urban, the small places in a larger way. This is my take.
I would like to add something here. Is that okay?
Sure.
Can I please add?
Yes, Puniji.
See, we also have to understand that in our planning system, what I was trying to say earlier on, that most of our mega cities are developing with the manufacturing sector going away from the city. It's not in the city anymore. It's going towards the hinterland or away from into the peri-urban areas. Now, what is happening actually now is that these peri-urban areas where the manufacturing is happening, we are not making any provision for the working population. The working population actually is finding a place to live in the urban villages that the mega city is engulfing. So the urban villages are becoming pockets where the migrant population comes and finds its place to stay, to buy the things that they need for their livelihood, and then they travel to the workplace and come back. So they are now dependent on the transport system. So what Anupam is, I think, trying to say here is that if we are able to develop our affordable housing sector in those areas where actually people need to work, our pressure on the urban systems is going to reduce, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
This is okay. The next is
in fact,
Sanjay Goyal.
Yes. Yes, please.
Yeah, one architect is saying that right now what we are looking at, that our smart city missions are more about digitalization of the more focused on digitalization. So do you think that after this COVID situation we can make a shift in this approach, or we can shift from more digitalization to the proper designing of the smart cities and all those? What do you suggest from an architecture point of view?
Definitely, there will be a lot of shift, especially with regard to pollution. I think the most of the mega cities are suffering from pollution, and the kind of difference we have seen, and the thought process of the bureaucrats and the planners and the PMCs will be shifting more towards the habitable, livable quality of life, rather than the other features in the cities, which are not easy to achieve in India, having a 90 crore population of migrants or poor people. So it will be a shift, maybe up to some lesser extent.
Okay. Shamiji, I think we can take one last question from you. This question is very good. The question is that, do you think that there should be a change in density norms or policy kind of, because now what we can see is our metro cities are highly dense, whereas if we shift from our metro cities, our rural areas, these are quite open. So do you think that we should change our density norms, or we should not change it, or we should limit our urban areas to some refined spaces, or we should not touch our rural areas for that? What do you suggest?
Look, definitely we need to rethink our density norms, especially in context of the COVID situation. Look, it is a balance between high density, highly energy efficient living, because you are concentrating everybody in a particular area, and you are able to people are able to reach their workplaces in a short duration, vis-a-vis the health condition, which requires that there should be a lower density. So in those terms, yes, the density norms need to go down. One lesson that everybody is going to learn from this thing is that work from home is possible to a large extent. So this will help reduce the pressure. Also, if you want a more sustainable development and a more environment which is more conducive to live in, we need to reduce our densities. But yes, it is going to be it has to be a balance between energy consumption and living conditions.
Yeah,
Definitely, definitely.
sorry, I
So,
want to add something. I want to add something here, please.
yeah, please, please.
Just allow me a minute. I'm sorry. I might have to actually contradict with Shamit here. Our density norms are not as bad as what we think they are. The actual ground reality is much different. Now, I was doing a research project on informal sector, and I came across a newspaper report in which a police officer in Gurgaon had been quoted, where he said that while the census of India puts the Gurgaon population, say, at a figure X, however, their own estimates of how many people are there in the city is actually 2X. Now, our density at the city population is based on the planning norms which have been laid down. However, this double population that is there, which is because they are migrant population which is serving the service sector and the manufacturing sector in the peri-urban area, makes the entire equation go wrong. So I think our entire city planning has to focus on catering to our migrant population. If we don't look at this, I think we are going to again make a mistake which maybe time will never allow us to rectify.
This impact will be there for sure.
The issue is very rightly put. Slums do not have any density norms defined. They exist, and they exist without following any rules and regulations. That is why they are slums. So, very rightly said, those numbers don't have not been counted. On paper, the density might be very low, but in actual, the densities are very high.
Neeraj,
Yeah,
Neeraj,
sir. So I think, I think we should sum up the session now. Yeah. So thank you very much. This is my proud privilege to extend the vote of thanks to all eminent speakers: Charanjit ji, Shamit Manchanda ji, Puneet ji, Dr. Pios, Dr. Fareed, Architect Anupam Mittal, Architect Lalita ji, Architect Sanjay ji. So this is what. Thank you so much for sparing your time and joining us for this wonderful series of lectures. We are thankful to the audience who are patiently listening to us. We are thankful to our IT team, Harinder Saini mainly. So I would like to share with you that this is a series of lecture which SOCHM, Council for Green and Eco-Friendly Movement, and Smart Habitat Foundation are doing jointly. This is a wonderful series we have started. Next session is on 22nd May at 5 o'clock. So the topic of that session is redefining smart and sustainable green home settlement post COVID-19. So please join us for that session also. And again, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.
Session.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
I'm grateful to Dr. Piaz, Fareed, and Lalita, who are from outstation. Nevertheless, on the webinar, it doesn't make a difference, but still, we are grateful to you that you have joined from outside Delhi. Thank you very much. And also Mr. Sanjay Goyal, who is from Ludhiana. Yes, of course, my friend Anupam, Shamit, and Puneet ji, all from Delhi. Thank you very much, all of you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
You're welcome. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Uh,
Welcome.